Today, I'm going to show you how to create an ad using the content-aware scale tool and the warp tool in Photoshop. Hey there and welcome to Phlearn. My name is Aaron Nace and you can find me on Phlearn.com where we make learning Photoshop and photography fun. And today's episode is going to be really cool. We're going to be stretching an image out, giving us more space on the right-hand side of our image. Now, in order to do so, we're going to use the content-aware scale tool. Basically what this does is it maintains detail. So if you have a person in your photo, the person is not going to get stretched out, just the background will get stretched out. It's a really cool tool and it helps a lot for creating more space in your images. We're also going to be adding type to this image because I want to make it look like an ad. Now, in this case, the type is actually over top of where the clouds are in the photos. So in order to clean the image up a little bit, we're going to use the warp tool to move the clouds in the photos, and then our type can sit there perfectly in blank space. All right, guys, we got an awesome episode. Let's go ahead and jump into Photoshop. So here's our image for today. This is an awesome photo for a simple ad. In this case, it's going to be for Maui. Now, I need somewhere I can put my type. So I'm going to hit T for the type tool. We're going to click on our image here, and I'm going to type in Maui. All right, and we're going to use huge letters. They might not wind up being that large, but they are going to be large. And in this case, I don't want to just stick them right over top of my subject because it's a little bit messy. I want a lot of blank space in my image where I can put these letters. So we're going to move them over here to the right-hand side. Now, in order to actually see the rest of the image, let's go ahead and zoom out here, and I'm going to use the crop tool. We're going to hit C for the crop tool, or you can hit right over here. And I'm going to click here on the right-hand side and just drag this out until I can actually see all of my letters. There we go, and we'll give it a little bit more space. Okay, cool. That looks great. Cool. So now we're going to show you the difference between using the regular transform tool to stretch it and the content-aware scale tool. Okay, so jumping back in, we're going to start off with a regular transform. So let's hit Control or Command T for the transform. I'm going to click here on the right-hand side, and we're going to just stretch our image out. Now, you can see that, yes, our image is getting stretched out, but my subject is getting stretched out as well. So by the time I get here, she looks pretty weird, right? This is not how you want to do a transform in Photoshop because you're going to be basically making your subject look totally weird. So let's go ahead and hit Escape there. We don't want to use the regular transform. Instead, we're going to use the content-aware scale. So we're going to go to Edit and down to Content-Aware Scale. Now, the way the Content-Aware Scale tool works, it basically keeps in mind areas of detail. So, for instance, like our subject in this photo has a lot of detail. Our background, it's basically just like clouds and an ocean and sand and things like that. There's not a lot of detail there. So it's going to stretch those areas out first while trying to keep the detailed areas intact. All right, so jumping back in, we're in our Content-Aware Scale. Now, we're going to click here on the right-hand side and start pulling this out. Now you can see it's starting to stretch out this area first, right? It's starting to pull out my ocean. First, it's, we see it pulling out our island over here on the left-hand side. All right, but our subject is actually staying completely intact. You can see the bike and everything like that looks just like it did when it started. So pulling this out here definitely works really well. My subject looks great, but the rest of my photo has been stretched out. And this might be totally okay, but I want the left-hand side of my image to be completely maintained. I just want to stretch out the right-hand side. So if this is all you're looking to do, let's try bringing this up a little bit. See, you could add more room to your image like this if you wanted to, give it a little bit more. If you keep going and keep going and keep going, it is going to start stretching out areas like your subject. So it doesn't work like to infinity, but it does work pretty well. So let's hit Escape here. Instead of stretching out this entire image, what we're going to do is I'm going to select out the right-hand side of the image, and we're just going to content-aware scale that. So let's use our marquee tool. All right, we're going to make a selection right here on the right side of our image. There we go. And go to Edit, down to Content-Aware Scale, and now we're just going to scale this area over. So it's still going to try to keep detail in the photo. As it does, we're basically stretching over and over and over, and there will reach a limit. I mean, even there, it still looks pretty good actually, but I wouldn't recommend trying to go crazy with the content-aware scale tool. But for that, let's hit Enter and see how that looks. So Control or Command D to deselect, And zooming in, you can see, I mean, not completely perfect, but we do have detail here in the waves and the ocean and things like that. And we have scaled out that part of our image, which I think is really, really cool. So we've basically taken a regular image and kind of turned it into a panorama using this feature. All right, so that's how the content-aware scale tool works. Basically, it stretches out the areas with fewer detail first, leaving the areas with more detail intact. All right, let's jump back in and finish up our ad. All right, guys, I think this looks great. Now, our Maui type, we're gonna make this a little bit smaller. So we're gonna hit Control-Command-T and just click here on our corner there and bring our type down just a little bit smaller. There we go, so we have a little bit more space here. Now, I think this looks great, but we're gonna set that kind of like right there on our horizon. I wanna read Maui a little bit better, okay? And where the clouds are, there's kind of like a little bit of interference here. Now, there are a lot of different ways that you could do this. You could try, like, for instance, if you wanna create a layer under there and try grabbing a brush tool and just like painting with, there we go. We're just gonna paint with blue under there. Yeah, okay, you could do that, but then you're gonna run into this area here where it's like, that doesn't look natural there. So what we're gonna do instead, let's go ahead and delete that. We're gonna actually make a selection around this area, and I'm gonna use the warp tool to just warp these clouds up. Because in this case, it's clouds. They don't really have to like be in any particular shape, right? Like the clouds come in every shape possible, so you can just warp them and it's gonna be totally fine. So here in our background, what we're gonna do is we're gonna zoom in, and I'm gonna start off with a selection. So let's use our, there we go. We're gonna use our polygonal lasso tool. Okay, and we're gonna make a selection starting here on our subject, and we're just gonna kind of go right around our subject, because I do wanna warp this image, there we go, but I don't want it to affect our subject. There we go, and we'll just kind of go right around here. I'm not worried about doing like a perfect job here. Basically, I'm selecting the areas that I don't want to warp. All right, so that looks pretty good. Let's go all the way over here. All right, click a point there, up to the top, and right over here to the left. Okay, and hit enter. So this is the area that I'm going to warp. Now, when I warp this, basically I'm only going to be warping the right-hand side, but I want a little bit of room here on the left-hand side, because as I start warping over here, basically it's going to affect the entire area. So you want to make your warp, wherever you plan on warping, you want to make your selection a little bit larger than you need your warp to be. That way it just gives you a little bit more room to play with in Photoshop. Okay, so we've got our selection active. Now we're going to hit Control-Command-T for our transform, and we're going to go up here to our warp. There we go. Now within our warp, you can actually choose a bunch of different warps. You can choose it to be like an arc, something like that. You can choose to be a bulge, all these different things. Now in this case, those are not helpful at all. So let's go ahead and hit escape. We're going to hit Command-T again. All right, and let's click on our warp, or you can right click and go down to warp. Either one, here, right over here, or this button, they do the exact same thing. Okay, so let's click on warp. Now basically what we're going to do is grab our corner right up here, and I'm going to start stretching this up. There we go, and you can see basically I'm stretching my clouds. Okay, we're going to pull this little corner there, and you basically see I'm sticking to the right hand side of my document for the most part, because I don't really want to affect the left hand side of my document, right? If I start warping over here, you're going to see we start getting a little bit more of a weird result. So we want to stick to the right hand side. It's just going to make it look a bit more natural. All right, there we go, and maybe we'll just go a little bit higher there. Maui. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. So I can totally change the shape of our clouds. All right, let's hit enter there. There we go. Command-D to deselect, and let's look at our before and after. So there's our before and our after. Basically, we just warp those clouds away, and it looks totally natural because, again, clouds come in pretty much every shape possible. All right, guys, so basically what we've done, really simple here. We've taken a regular image, we've stretched it out, added some type, and warped our clouds up, and now we have a lot of room for type. So in this case, like, I'm just going to use a simple Maui. That's totally fine, but if you had a logo or something like that you wanted to slap over here, we've got a lot of room for type in our image, which makes it perfect for an ad. All right, guys, and that's how we use the content-aware scale tool as well as the warp tool in Photoshop. If you want to do this yourself, just follow these key steps. The content-aware scale tool works really well when you have a simple background in your image. In this case, we use a beach. So in order to use the Content Aware Scale tool, simply select out the area you'd like to scale, go to Edit and down to Content Aware Scale. Go ahead and stretch your image out, and it's going to maintain detail in areas while still stretching out your image. Next, we wanted to make some room for the type in this image. So we made a selection around our clouds and then hit Control-Command-T, right click and go down to Warp. Here we're able to push and pull different parts of our image around, and in this case we just basically pulled our clouds right up and out of the way, making more room for our type. These tools are so simple to use, and they're really helpful when you're trying to create more room in your photos. Guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me today and learning some Photoshop. If you love Photoshop as much as I do, go ahead and click on your screen right about now. We'll send you free Photoshop and photography episodes every single week. And if you have a question about today's episode, simply leave it in a comment right down below. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much, guys. I'll Phlearn you later. Cool. All right. Cool. All right, let's jump in. All right. Cool. All right. All right. All right. Cool. All right. Great. All right. All right. Champion.